One of which was, she might have been at church the first Sunday that I was on platform as a practitioner, where you do the reading and the prayer. And I made my way through that and then went to brunch with a bunch of my friends. And one of those people looked at me and said, you know what's really great about you is that we have these practitioners who are like super polished. And now you've just shown us that anyone can do it. Hopefully she'll be surprised. 3 times with me, there is only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. There is only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. There is only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. So last week, we kicked off September, and Reverend Jenny did a talk, thank you for the weekend off, about feel. She called it feel, forget everything else and love. And I understand she made some really interesting confessions. I'm not going to do the same thing to the podium about her love of fiction. But she actually quoted from a book that she was reading, a piece of advice from an older woman to a younger one, and I thought this was definitely worth repeating. She said, 1, no matter where life takes you, the place you stand at any moment is holy ground. And 2, love hard, love wide, and love long, and you will always find goodness in it. That was worth coming back to. But I was searching for inspiration for this week, and sort of, I was asked to describe either science of mind or who we are as a church, or because we've invited our friends to be here, and welcome to those of you who are here for the first time today. So I went searching for some inspiration out there in the land of the internet, and I thought maybe some signs from some other churches would help me describe us. So if any of these sound like us, you can say so, but go ahead and start running them. Yeah, the fact that there's a highway to hell and only a stairway to heaven says a lot about anticipated traffic numbers. There we go. That might be us. That's us. Be the kind of person your pet thinks you are. That's us. That's us. Hillside Church, blah, 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 just come to church. Oh, that's inspiring. God expects spiritual fruit, not religious nuts. I don't know, we might fall in that category some days. That was bold of me. I can't believe somebody put that up. This is us. If history repeats itself, I'm so getting a dinosaur. Life has no remote. Get up and change yourself. That might be us. Life has no remote. Get up and change yourself. That one, I think, hits the core of this philosophy and this way of being. If you want your life to be different than it is, if you want to expand and grow your heart and your life and everything around you, then you actually have to be willing to change and expand your heart and your life. Sometimes we say we want to change and then we really don't so much. But when we get that in alignment, amazing things happen. They don't always look like we think they should look. Change often comes in forms that we just don't expect at all. But faith, the absolute knowing and trust that Spirit is always working for us and not against us ever, if we really know that, then we can step back a bit from the harder things and take a longer view of them. Instead of always falling into the trap of something wicked this way comes, we can underneath know that something sacred this way comes. That might have to be my new tagline. Something sacred this way comes. And for that to happen, we have to be willing to move. We talk about that a lot here. We have to be willing to move towards it. We have to be willing to take a stance of openness and love and compassion for ourselves and for other people. We have to be willing to move towards what we want, because the sky very rarely opens up and drops the new job or the new partner or the expanded life in our lap. We have to make steps. But when we are in motion, when we have taken movement and motion towards, even if it's just mental motion towards, then amazing things happen in our life. Seemingly miraculous things will open up, and it will seem to other people like it landed in our lap. And often what I find is that it feels to me like it has been waiting for me all along. Because if you can see it and visualize it and encompass it in your own mind, then it is yours to move into, because no one else has the same dream and vision that you do. It might be a little similar some days, but mostly not. And so if you can hold it, then it is yours, and it will feel like you came home to it. I just thought, love and good are just sneaky like that, you know? Now, Henry David Thoreau wrote this whole Walden thing, and I'm going to read it today. Some of you have heard it a number of times in some classes, but I want you to really tune into it differently. There's more to it than Mary Morrissey quotes, okay? So he said, I learned this, at least, by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which has been imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him. And the old laws will be expanded and interpreted in her favor in a more liberal sense. And we will live with the license of a higher order of beings. In proportion as we simplify our life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty poverty, nor weakness weakness. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundation under them. Now, Henry David went off and lived in the woods by himself in a cabin and to get all this. And I've always said, you know, it'd be super nice and kind of easier to be the guru on the hill, where people just come to you for a little spout of wisdom and you don't actually have to deal with the masses in any way, shape, or form. But what I have learned along the way is that true growth comes from dealing with people and being with people. And what I have also learned along the way is that surrounding myself with people who will hold my vision sacred, who will tell me, yes, absolutely, you can do and grow and be and create the life that you love and want. People who will remind me to keep going when the old paradigms in my head start to want to tell me to stop. That kind of community is priceless. NTNC is that community. If you're here visiting today, and even if you're not here for the first time but you don't know everybody yet, I would venture to guess that you could walk up to anyone in this room today and you could ask how these teachings have changed their lives, and they would have a story for you. They will have something in their life that has shifted or grown or expanded as a result of this practice and this philosophy and probably this church. Ernest Holmes, in 1939, in a home study course lesson, he wrote, when a group of people come together with one accord and with one thought, a greater power is generated. Not because the creative principle responds to a number of people more than it does to one, but because the combined faith of a group reaches a higher level of acceptance. In other words, when my faith falters, my group, I can lean into my group. I can lean into my people, and they will remind me. And when your faith falters, you can lean into your people, and then you can be the person that someone else can lean into. You know, and more recently when we were studying Lynn McTaggart's book, The Power of Eight, and she wrote kind of the same thing, but proved by experiment. She said when individuals in a group focus their intention together on a single target, a powerful collective dynamic emerges that can heal long-standing conditions, mend fractured relationships, reduce violence, and even rekindle a sense of purpose in one's life. So here's the other thing. Everyone in here has a life uplifted story. But what they might not remember to tell you is that somewhere along the way from point A to point C, there was a moment of B. That's the moment. You know? We talk about, it's the place where everything in their mind, everything in our minds at some point starts to argue for the status quo. It starts to argue with us and tell us for all of the reasons that we cannot go where we want to go. It will bring up everything we ever did wrong in our past. It will bring up all of the stuff that would tell us no. It will try to protect our hearts. It will tell us, you have failed at relationships at least 27 times. Why would you do it again? Because practice makes perfect, right? For starters. You know, we talk about paradigm shifts in here a lot. Because sometimes it's a big shift to start to think of God as love, or to think of spirit as always for us, or to know and think that we can create a life that we love in all times. And our brain will argue for the comfort that it knows. And I kept thinking, what would you do or be or love if you came to understand the truth that everything is working for you? Everything. And real shifts, here's the thing that we bump up, well, okay, I'll just talk about myself, that I bump up against, is that real shift takes time. We love instant information and gratification and quickness, you know. And I kept thinking while I was working on this, you know, it took me all of my 29 years to create these patterns in my brain. Right? All of you, you've taken at least 29 years to create these patterns in your brain. And so, you know, the arguer, who, you know, I call Maynard, I know, it's my fantasy. No, you know, my arguer that I call Maynard is loud with doubt and fear and distrust. Maynard brings up all those things that didn't work. Maynard is a pain in the ass. Really. Leaning in to spiritual community, leaning into people who believe, means that we focus our attention on something higher. And here's the thing. We cannot fully focus our attention on more than one thing at a time. So we can do Maynard, or we can breathe and do truth. Or we can do Maynard, or we can breathe and do God. Or we can do Maynard, or we can breathe and do love. The master teacher even said that the greatest of all is love one another, right? Just love one another. Now, in studying the power of 8, you know, we all, as a group, participated in groups of 8 in prayer and intention for a period of time. We did a round of that as the entire community in the summer. And now we have some ongoing groups that are going now for about that 4th and 5th week. And I would bet, there's a whole bunch of you are doing this, but I would bet that right now you're here in Maynard. You've maybe missed a couple of days at your time, so I should just quit. I missed 3 days. That's your brain. You know, it doesn't really work. This is stupid. This is not really going to work. This is not going to change anything. It's not changing anything. The world is still the way the world is. And I'm going to tell you right now that this is not about, it will be about changing the world, but right now it's about changing our own internal dialogue and supporting and leaning into the people that we have said that we are praying with. Real and lasting change takes a realignment of our neural pathways. That's the fact of it. Real and lasting change means that we can shake hands with Maynard and say, I hear you, and you can move along. It's probably never going to go completely away, you know. Maynard also has a function of keeping us safe in the world. But those old pathways, you know, one is forming and another one is dying, and it doesn't want to die. which kind of got me thinking on a sidebar note of the world out there a little bit. And that there seems to be a lot of things happening that are not kind and not compassionate and perhaps not how we think the world should be working. I mean, I'll just say it, like Nazism, not in my world. So, but I kept thinking that, everything that is true in the micro, everything that is true in us is true in the macro, in the larger world. And so if change has been accelerating, which I believe it has been, there is more talk, if you turn off the blabbery news and you look at other things, there is more talk about compassion and love and mindfulness in the world right now than there ever has been before. Ever. So maybe all that other stuff is the collective Maynard trying to survive and dying anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's the collective Maynard. But here's the thing. Meanness wants to stay alive. It does. So here's the thing, and here's our part in it. If we turn towards that with anger and frustration, then we are meeting it where it is and feeding it. But if we turn towards it, filled with a space of love and prayer and the knowing that love always wins, that there is a higher order of being emerging for all of us, then we can turn and face it with God and with grace, and we can still, in that space, look at it and say, not in my world. But we meet it here in love. And love always wins. Always. Doesn't mean we ignore it, but we do not meet it where it lives. So, anyway, back to our own stuff. Our own paradigms, or the world's, or your prayer groups. Just stay the course. Stay the course. Keep loving yourself enough. And if you can't love yourself enough, love your prayer partners enough to stay the course. Just stay in. And if you haven't signed up for one of those groups and you would like to, there's places to do that over with everything else. Now, I listened this week to an Oprah Super Soul thing with a woman named Tracy McMillan, who I had actually never heard about. She talks about love and relationships, and she wrote a book called Why You Aren't Married Yet. She was very interesting. Anyway, she talks about practicing love and that we have to practice love the same way we practice yoga. And I thought, well, okay, let me think about that. So I thought, well, if I'm gonna start out a yoga practice, and if I'm gonna try out yoga, then there's a couple things I'm gonna do. That means it's a practice. That means I have to go at it more than once without quitting if I'm really gonna make that part of my journey. So I have to go regularly. I probably want to have a teacher, because those poses look like they could hurt if you didn't do them correctly, right? So you want to find a teacher, somebody that can help you stretch in the right way so you don't get hurt. And then you want to practice surrounded by other people who look as silly in yoga pants as you do. Okay, this is about me. And then hopefully you're practicing with somebody who's ahead of you, who looks great in their yoga pants and reminds you of why you're doing this. And then hopefully also there's someone coming in behind you that you can support and encourage as they move into it. So I started thinking, really, NTNC, if I was going to describe MTNC today, it's like we're a big yoga class. You know, spiritual practice in stretch and motion. Somebody told me recently that, this is probably not the church for if you don't want to change or move, because I guess I'm like that. I don't know. But spiritual practice and stretch and motion, which means sometimes the stretching is easy and graceful, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we bump against each other and help each other rub our edges off. Sometimes, occasionally someone farts, because that happens in yoga. Sometimes someone cries, and sometimes we laugh, and sometimes we cry some more, and sometimes we laugh some more. Sometimes things go exactly how we want them to go. Sometimes we end on time, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes things go exactly the way we would want, and sometimes they don't. But what I've learned is that when we stay in it, when we stay the course, when we don't run away with our yoga pants and a wad, usually we learn something. We learn something either way. We learn something either way. So I'm going to close today with a quote from Charles Fillmore, who was the co-founder of Unity. He said, "The true church is not made of creeds and forms, nor is it contained in walls of wood and stone. The heart of people is its temple, and the Spirit of truth is the one guide into all truth. When we learn to turn within to the Spirit of truth, who is in each one for light and inspiration, the differences between churches of mankind will be eliminated, and the one church will be recognized." And I thought, well, really, may we be, I think we are, may we be a part of the one church, which I think is the church of love and kindness and compassion. The church of how do we be better people in the world, and how do we truly create a world that works for everyone? The spirit, and I would prefer to call it the spiritual center of that, but really, how do we be the center of the centers? And may we, here at NTNC, serve as part of the foundation under all of your hopes and dreams. That's what we come here every day trying to do. Support your hopes, your dreams, your spiritual growth, your connection with God, your connection with the divine. That's what all the classes are about. That's what all the Sundays are about. That's what all that we do, all the music, everything we do is about helping you and supporting you in finding a greater connection with the divine that lives within you. And that's what we're here for. And, you know, as we like to say around here, one spirit, one community, right? Here we go. Who wants prayer? Excellent.